One word. One word can make a huge difference. Imagine that you are at the grocery store. It's been a long, hectic, rough day. The weather outside is awful. I mean, it could be raining like it is today, or maybe the snow is just coming down harder, the wind is blowing, it's getting colder, and you quickly go in and you grab the things that you need, and thankfully there's only 14 of them, so you're standing in the express line, and suddenly a person behind you taps you on the shoulder and says, "Excuse me, could I cut in front of you? I only have 7 items." Now, what's your response? Hey, lady, just wait your turn. But now picture that same thing with one word added to it. Can I cut in line because? And then it could be my son got hurt at school and they just called me. Or because whatever. That one word, because, can change our attitudes and our actions, can't it? Or, I know I've done this. I've got to do whatever. I've got to mow the lawn. I've got to take out the trash. I've got to get up in the morning. I've got to, but change it to I get to. Makes a big difference, doesn't it? Just that one little change. Zig Ziglar says it really well in one of the stories that he tells, and he says this: you go to the doctor because you're not feeling well, the doctor prescribes some medication, and you go and get the medication, and a week later you go back for a follow-up visit, and the doctor says you're reacting to the medication. That's not good. But what if he says you're responding to the medication? One word. It makes such a difference. And we're in Romans still today, chapter 12, verse 17. And notes are on the YouVersion Bible app under events, if you want to go there. And there's no doubt that you and I are mistreated and reacted to on occasion, aren't we? It may be in the car, or it may be with someone that we love. They say something or do something. And because it's life. But what should we do? How should we behave? Here's what Paul says: repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. I think that a key lesson here is often we don't think. Isn't that true? I mean, have you ever said, well, I didn't think about that? Or I never gave it a second thought. We react. And that's human nature. That's our instinct. It's to hit back. Every parent here has probably heard this statement. And many of you maybe have even said, well, he hit me first. Right? Our instinct is to react. The wisest man who ever lived, in Proverbs 24:29 says this: do not say, I'll do to him as he's done to me. I'll pay that man back for what he did. Acting that way is natural. We don't even have to, do you have to work at it? No. I mean, I find myself every now and then when I'm driving and people cut you off or speed around you and then they get in front of you and they slow way down, that I want to react. Anybody else ever feel that way? A few hands went up. The rest of you don't want to admit it. So it's like it's what you want to do. But Paul is saying we need to think. And I think that the first thing we need to remember is that when we react, it's never good. Or rarely good. Instead, what we should do is we need to respond instead of reacting. And when we do that, it leaves the door open. And what do I mean by that? When we react, it closes the door to ever reaching that person for Jesus Christ. It closes the door of us ever being able to talk to them about their eternal destiny. It closes the door to us having any kind of real relationship with them. And not only that, it gives them an opportunity to come back and say things like, well, do you know what that so-called Christian did to me? Or that goody two-shoes, they're supposed to be religious, but you know what they did to me? Always leaving out what they did first, right? Always leaving out the part, well, yeah, I slugged him 3 times and then he pushed me. No, he pushed me. When we respond, we are able to have a testimony to the love of God for all men. Because isn't that how God is? God doesn't react to us. God responds to us. And think about it. Jesus is a responder. Listen to what he says in Matthew chapter 5, verses 38 through 48. You have heard that it was said, eye for an eye, and tooth for a tooth. Oh, I like that verse. Let's just keep that verse. Now I can be any way I want to be, right? I can cut that person off in traffic. I can slow down in front of them when they're speeding. I can react to their bad behavior towards, and it doesn't even have to be bad. It can just be behavior that I don't like. I like. But he goes on. But I tell you, shouldn't we listen to what Jesus tells us? Do not resist an evil person. If someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if someone wants to sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. If someone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. When Jesus said this, it was not uncommon for a Roman soldier to ask someone to carry their backpack and all of that stuff for 1 mile. In fact, it was the law. If a soldier came up to you and said, hey, I want you to carry this for me, you were required to do it. And he says, well, hey, don't just go 1 mile, go 2. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Have you ever done that? Someone who's just a thorn in your flesh, instead of grumbling and complaining and moaning and groaning and talking to anybody who will listen to you, have you said, you know what? I'm going to pray for that person every day. I wonder if we did that, what might happen? He goes on and says, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and he sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your brothers, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Aren't you glad that Jesus is a responder and not a reactor? When I think of my own life and what I deserve, I don't deserve what he's given to me. I think I've said this before, but don't grumble because you didn't get what you wanted. Be thankful that you didn't get what you deserve. We deserved punishment. We deserve to spend eternity separated from God. We deserved pain and suffering and agony. But in exchange for that, God, through his Son, Jesus Christ, and his death on the cross, has given us new life, has given us joy, has, instead of reacting to our bad behavior, has responded in love. In 1 Peter 3:9 it says this, "Do not repay evil with evil, or insult with insult, but with blessing. Because of this you were called, so that you may inherit a blessing." When we respond instead of reacting, we leave the door open. And isn't the most important thing someone's eternal destiny? I read an article this week that was talking about a verse in Hebrews where it talks not to neglect getting together as a church, especially as you see the day approaching. Sometimes I think we forget about that person who is irritating, who is pushing our buttons, they are going to be alive for eternity. And the only hope that they have is the hope that we have enjoyed and received, and that hope is Jesus. It doesn't matter anything else other than that. When we leave the door open, we have an opportunity to share the love of Christ with them. And it's hard. We can't do this in our own strength because I instinctively want to react. I want to give them what they deserve. And God says, don't do that. And when we respond instead of react, who are we acting like? Jesus. When we react, we're acting like the world. Now, who do you want to act like this morning? Jesus or the world? When we respond, we do what is right, we do what is noble, and we give a strong testimony of God's love and our faith that even when we're wronged, God can take care of us. Paul says to the Corinthians, "For we are taking pains to do what is right, not only in the eyes of the Lord, but also in the eyes of men." Next week, we're going to go to verse 18. And has anybody had any conflict in their life lately? It's a part of life, isn't it? I mean, we can't avoid it. But Paul tells us in verse 18, our responsibility is to make sure that our side of the relationship is right. That our inner desire is to genuinely be at peace with all men. We're to be bridge builders, is what Paul calls us to do. Let's stand for a closing word of prayer. Father, you know that, man, I just want to react. And I want to do to them what they've done to me. Help us to be more like you. Help us to think through it and to turn to you. And I know sometimes I don't want to ask you because I already know what you're going to say, and I don't really want to do that. And Remind me of how you have loved me when I've been ugly. Of how you have loved me when I've been selfish and self-centered. And Father, as we allow your Spirit to do its transforming work in our lives, may we treat others as you have treated us. And no matter how hard we try in our own strength and our own ability, we can't love like this. We have to allow your love, which we've received, to flow out of our lives into the lives of others. Help us also to remember that the most important thing, the number one thing, is that every person that we come in contact with is created in your image and will face eternity one day, either with you or separated from you. Now, as we go our separate ways, may we be a blessing because we've been blessed. In Jesus' name I pray. And everyone said, we'll see you guys next week.